Hi, I'm Jonathan Albin, and this is Passages RPG channel, function of Nikos RPG. I'm creator, designer, developer, and my purpose for doing this show is initially to start a conversation that I anticipate is going to grow beyond just myself in terms of messaging here. The very concept that we have in our culture today that a person has to, when they grow up, they have to give up being the child inside. They have to give up the joy and the excitement and the fun of life in order to advance, to get ahead, get their ducks in a row, their numbers in the till, so to speak. And I'm here to be an advocate for the very concept of play overall. Now, I have a personal agenda in that I am a big believer in game play as compared with the independent play with toys that maybe is more directly associated with childhood. But it's difficult sometimes when we are looking at the future for us to recognize or comprehend that there is a real reason to continue the play mechanism. And I have an agenda there too, in that I have kind of been an observer and a student of the world with a focus on trying to, if you will, advocate for gameplay for so long that sometimes I have to step back and have conversations with people that don't have this view so that I can understand where people are today and perhaps help in the advocacy for gameplay. If you didn't notice, you probably can't even tell, I'm fidgeting with an object in my hand. And some people utilize fidget things or whatever. But me, it's a dice. It's a colorful 20-sided die. Well, so since we don't have a big background and we don't have a big dramatic group of people that are yet engaging with me to talk about this, let me do a little bit of expository monologue. Okay. As I mentioned, I'm Jonathan Albin, and I've been a storyteller and game master since the 1970s. I learned to play from one of the guys that designed Dungeons and Dragons. But I've also been a player and an aficionado in every style and type of game, starting with classic card games like cribbage and canasta and bid whist and euchre and. As a matter of fact, when I was a kid, one of the real focuses to becoming a human being was the realization that our family, at least, utilized gameplay as a medium for exchange of information. We would go to, just about every one of our holidays was spent going to our grandparents' house or to other relatives' house. And inevitably, we would be there 3, 4, 5 minutes, maybe that many, and somebody would break out a card table, and we'd start picking partners for classic card games. Generally speaking, the quote menfolk would play cribbage or what was the other one? Canasta. Sometimes pinochle. So as we were saying, playing tabletop card games was the medium of exchange for our family. And one of the reasons why that was so effective is, I believe, that there is a mechanical connection between human beings that depends on something bigger than themselves to be the connector. what I'm referring to really, I suppose, would go back to, in ancient times when you had the elders of a community conveying information to the younger people and requiring sets of rules, regulations, stipulations on how they would communicate with one another. And I wish I could figure out what that does. I'm sorry, it really bothers me. But anyway, so they would set up regulations or rules for communication. And parents will do this also with children. They will say, go outside and play with your brother and sister. And that sometimes works because you can get the younger children to be idolizing of the older children or whatever, and they'll want to communicate. But generally speaking, we also utilize that time together as peer to make connections that are outside of ourselves. And so, simply speaking, by establishing, for example, a simple game like checkers, there are specific rules for who moves when. They can't play their own game. They have to play a game together. They have to give up their personal position on the subject and instead work together within that framework. Now, when learning that process, there is some loss of communication. In other words, you have to internalize the rule systems or whatever. But once the rules are understood, then they become a dissociated function. They're just something that you are doing while other things are going on. What this means, therefore, is that when you learn to play the game, then the game becomes just an engine that you both know and therefore have a shared experience that makes the other forms of communication easier. I tried not to make the branding notice on that. I apologize if there was any of that. I don't have any sponsors yet. So, by the way, if you didn't notice the track line going across the bottom here, if you want to learn more specifically about what I'm doing in the Passages role-play game system and the advancements that are going to happen in the short future in gameplay in general, check that out. You get to see a little bit more about where I'm going. And if you find any value in it, I'd ask you to consider supporting me with that program, because it's going to allow me and afford me the opportunity to do the even bigger things that I want to accomplish in the near future that are just going to change the way people play. So, having said that, the next thing I want to address in terms of this is that if we are now talking about communication and we have established that play is a means to do that, why don't we look for a few minutes at what play actually is? When we are youngsters and we're looking at the world, we have our parents as our guides, and in many ways they provide us every function and every need. So they are, pardon the parlance, but they are as unto gods to us, because they can do anything. They can put out fires, and they can protect us from, things that live underneath our bed or whatever. They give us all of this, the love and compassion and understanding. And I do realize that there are people that don't get that great of an advantage with that. And of course, there's always changes in people over time. But my reason for mentioning this is that when we begin to try to understand the world, we have only a few real means by which we can do this. The first one, of course, would be direct imitation. And I think this may be the realm that the concept of a toy comes into the world. In that, you take a ball, a sphere. We start to learn the understandings of physics in the world. If we roll the ball against the wall, the ball sometimes rolls back. The harder we roll it, the more likely it is to come back. We learn how shapes interact with our form and how they become, if you will, allegorical for the other things in our life. moving up the scale a bit when you get to playing with, say, dolls. And I know it may sound foreign to say this, but the idea of playing with dolls is on both the male and the female side. I mean, I had G.I. Joes. Later they called them action figures. And of course, as you get older, you be more macho about it because that's culturally what you have to do. But the idea of playing with dolls is actually giving us the methodology for interacting with people, especially with people of smaller size, so that we learn the concepts of caring and nurturing, connectedness, identity with the inanimate object. This is particularly, I suppose, more advantageous when you are talking about, being an only child or a first child than it is perhaps in later in the cycle, because then you'll have younger brothers or sisters. But the idea still stands that the doll gives us ways to emulate and imitate our parents and the way they treat and care for us. And I think there's a bit of a feedback there that most people don't even realize, is that is when you do so, when you interact with your doll as you have seen others do, it really gives a feedback loop to that parent as well, because the parent will hear the imaginary conversations. I do have to stop there for a second. The concept of imagination is so integral to humanity that I believe if you looked at it without any other framework, it is our inquisitive and curious and imaginative nature that led to all of our development over time. And I'm sure that at some point I will have people that will join the chat that will be going, no, you've got that wrong. That's not how it works. Oh, cool effect. Didn't notice that. Ooh. I'm playing all the time. Imagination is our interaction with the universe. Imitation is our interaction with the experience of watching others interact with the world. And I think one of the challenges to our aging process as we get older, as we get bigger in life, I mean, I say this a lot and I'm going to repeat it again. My son declared himself older than me when he turned 18, and that was 18 years ago. So considering that therefore means I'm only still 17, I'm perfectly fine with that. But the connection that we have with other people is a combination of learning how to imitate what they want from us and to exert our personal feelings, our personal will on the world by the imagination. We're able to, for example, if I want my parents to come to my room, sure, I can ask for a glass of water, but you only get away with that like once or twice, right? And then if you're still a youngster and you want their attention, then you start to imagine, what if there was something under my bed? I better see how they would react to something being under my bed. So I'm going to create in my mind, and it's not even willful, it's not even intentional, because we as creative beings make assumptions. We heard a crack, maybe it's a cricket chirping under there or something. We hear something, and now all of a sudden the imagination flares up and starts to create for us what that thing is. So toy play becomes a mechanism by which we can emulate the world around us, imitate it so others can see. And I think it's, like I said, a feedback loop, because if we are playing with it inappropriately, I mean, if you're taking a rock and trying to smack the head off of your G.I. Joe, I don't think Dad's going to let you keep it very long. So, therefore, when we look at the way children play, it kind of gives us some insight into the way adults interact. Now, having said that, when we're talking about the education process and the learning process, toys let us do a one-to-one interaction as if it was real. And that as if, I think, is really important, because until we know what is, as if is the best we can do. So the ability to play with objects, with toys, is a way for us to provide feedback to the adult units, the other humans around us, to see whether our imagination has validity, if there is any anchor to that. And this also, I think, feeds into, again, the imagination, because if you are playing with a doll, and you use any definition here, but if you're utilizing a doll or a satchel, or, obviously a doll is supposed to be a person, so the reaction with the doll should be philosophically more closely related to what you would do with a person than, say, what a ball or a set of blocks are. I mean, those are certainly things that are emulative of construction. We can build what we think a building looks like and get feedback from that. But when we are growing, therefore, the first portions of our learning processes are imitative, where you pick up a thing, and first interaction, of course, as a small child, is can I fit it in my mouth? What does it feel like on the tenderest parts? What does it taste like? What does it feel like? What does it, where we don't develop our olfactory sensory functions like this, as perhaps maybe some of our, I guess you'd say, co-inhabitors here, animals clearly utilize their sensory organs, like their nose, much more than we do. But we certainly use our mouth. Sometimes we use our ear, where we'll rattle to hear the sound. But I think it's more than that too, is I think you're also interacting and associating the rattle with the motion of your hand, and therefore coordinating those kind of things. That playfulness, therefore, is the method by which we learn, because we experiment individually, empirically, to see how things work. But we only get feedback if we experience that with others. This is why my personal theory is that games, the tabletop game, from Chutes and Ladders and Checkers to Dungeons and Dragons and the higher fantasy games, or even the big crunchy board games, are simply ways for us to learn allegorically. Checkers, you think, why would checkers be an allegory for anything? But it really sort of is, because you're taking from the other person, right? When you jump the piece, you collect those, and your score is dependent upon you beating the other person, getting more of his than yours until he has none left. That zero-sum game, that flat mechanic of tic-tac-toe or blocks, or any of those little tiny micro games that we played as children, are really to teach us that there's a winner and a loser, that there is a barrier that we can overcome with success. We can actually achieve something. And at the earliest levels, that mechanism really has more to do with the enjoyment of, what's the word today? Schadenfreude is the big term, which is the feeling of the good feeling we get when we watch other people have a bad time. Now, that sounds horrible, but the reality is that we have to then also be able to internalize that Schadenfreude. And I like the word Banbanam better. It's a Melanesian word. Actually, it carries the same concept of I got to do something, you did something, you did it wrong, and therefore I win. That's Banbanam. That's it. Aha. It's inherent in almost all higher level board games and such. Not only can I defeat my opponent, but can the actions that I take really mess with it. Other than to recognize that I'm able to defeat you with a strategy, with a mechanism. And if you've played tic-tac-toe, you know there's literally a way to make it so that nobody ever wins, or conversely, you win exactly as many as you lose. And that leads to something that we'll talk about later, which is LTWW, but we'll get to that a little bit later. What I'm referring to in particular in this case is the idea that we learn by seeing things that are exemplary to other things. Bright example, brilliant example. When you are a child and the oven is on, all of us have had the experience of our parents having to tell us no, to not touch that, to keep our hands away. And they're not doing that arbitrarily. They're not doing that to be mean. It's literally, I want to protect you from harm. And while we do learn from the "because I told you so" school of thought, I mean, every parent's always said it. I mean, I've done it myself. You can ask my son Joash, he'll tell you. But the concept that we are learning by command doesn't really work on a larger scale, and I think in some ways leads to our challenges that we meet in interacting with law enforcement or people in authority over us and things like that, because quite frankly, sometimes those rules feel arbitrary. They feel like somebody just said, "because I told you so." And empirically, that normally doesn't work. Normally, we have to have something that explains to us or expresses the justification behind those decisions. So games, therefore, give us an ability to see around that curve, so to speak, to see beyond the primary, to look at the extenuating circumstances that cause things to be so in our culture. Now, having stated that as well, there's another side to play that's important, is to realize that the allegorical nature, the story-related nature of our gameplay helps us to learn how to communicate. And I'm not talking about necessarily just the words. We learn how to be diplomatic, to be politic. If you were looking, for example, at a board game, and you and another player or 3 or 4 are engaged in the game, and one person, for example, simply takes a turn out of turn. The very concept of order and sequence, who goes first, who goes second, who goes third, is a mechanism we need to learn. So when somebody breaks that or violates that, it is our ability, therefore, to learn to be diplomatic, kind, and fair, and get that situation rectified. And I believe that if we don't play enough games when we're in life, if we don't play enough times, if we're not engaged in enough gameplay, we can't learn really effective communication skills, because we don't realize the internal give and take that means. My grandfather always called it benefit of the doubt. My maternal grandfather, Carl, my mother's dad, he was a master game player. He played every kind of card game I can think of, and probably a dozen more. And he wasn't a card sharp. It wasn't like he had particular, shuffling skills or anything like that. Nonetheless, his joy, his sheer joy of interacting through play really was the trigger that changed my life and put me on this pathway, by knowing that the way we interact, the way we play, is a reflection on how we will live, really impacted me. And it also, in this case, gives like a hard proof to what I'm saying. When you learn the diplomacy of being able to say, "Hey, excuse me, that wasn't your turn. We need to back that up because it's actually that person's turn." By having that capability and that diplomacy, even as children, we are therefore able to more clearly express those same objections when we do get older, so that when we are facing, a member of the authority subject, whether it be the librarian or whatever, when they are out of line in their response, we can at least express our dislike or our disfavor for that. And the more games we play, the more different varieties and types of games give us better and a more expansive allegorical toolbox to work from. Now, to say all of that almost sounds like I'm saying gameplay shouldn't be fun because it's learning and it's educational. But I submit to you that from my experience, I have, been a player all of my life. I have never considered myself to be frivolous or unkind. As a matter of fact, I argue that in a lot of ways I'm perhaps more sensitive than most towards the way other people feel, because I have played in so many experiences that when we are involved in any activity, I can look back to a games experience and say, oh, that reaction came from my time playing Carcassonne, because in Carcassonne, it's all about strategy and watching other people's moves and being aware of the situational conditions, the situational awareness, as they say today. That mechanism of learning how to interact with people is how we socialize and integrate. And I know this probably will lead to some counteraction talk. And if you've got any, please feel free to leave it in the chat, leave it in the comments after the video is posted. I would love to hear from you about this one. But I believe that we as a culture can improve everything if we impose or invoke a more playful engagement in life. We add more game play. And now, I'm going to step aside for a second because I know that the track I'm going down leads to controversy, and I don't want to push that. Instead, I want to focus on the positive side. Our interaction with objects as toys is an emulation, and that emulation teaches us how to think. Granted, there are times that the toys we play with can lead to imaginative thought as well. I mean, the idea of dropping a ball from the Tower of Pisa sounds pretty fun to me. Just, okay, it was a feather in a rock. But you know what I'm saying. The idea of the experimentation, the engagement of things to find physical laws or find how things actually work, that's critical. It's really important for us. Therefore, I'm not trying to downplay that. But what I'm proposing is that the social interaction that we get through game play, face-to-face social interaction, wherein it meets certain specific rulings, which I will explain in if I have time left. I might have time left today to go over it. But the very concept of what a game is defines whether it's useful for these kind of things or not. Granted, there are games out there, and I use the term game here to refer to mechanisms that have scoring by which you can compare with your own numbers. Golf is a great example. Golf is a game that while you're playing it with others and both of you are gaining score and you're trying to get, ahead of the other person by having fewer strokes or whatever, the very concept of playing golf is actually almost like a one-person game. It's almost like a puzzle, because what you're doing is figuring out how your musculature works in concert with the arbitrary and whatever weight of club you're going to use to move the ball from point A to point B and make points. Or an inverse scoring, in the case of fewer strokes, the better. The mechanism in that case is a toy, while the interaction is a game. Now, most of us don't think of things that way, but for example, in a cold winter, a family will pull out a puzzle, 3,000-piece masterwork puzzle. That's going to take them the better half of a day or two to pick up, because they know they've got plenty of time, and they're going to be socially interacting. There's no game mechanism, except there maybe is, because the guy who designed the game, the guy who drew the jigsaw and got all the pieces cut out and put it in the box, intended for you to solve his puzzle, conclude his picture. Now, it's even better because in the case of a puzzle, you sort of have a foregone conclusion because they give you the picture of the puzzle in the box. Now, my grandmother was one of these puzzle people, and one of her favorite puzzles was this oddity. I don't even know where she found it, but it was a die-cut crossword puzzle with no picture. And then, or it was a picture of cardboard. I can't remember. But the point is that the front and the back of each piece was fundamentally identical. But there was only one way to put the puzzle together properly. Even though some of the pieces looked close enough together that you could almost replace them, there was enough of a graining, in the image to know whether you put it together right or not. And that kind of puzzle, she loved that, because that's a lot of work. As compared to, say, a nice pastel or chalk drawing picture where the colors are very vivid, easily defined, so you can match the colors. The crossword puzzle of cardboard was one of her favorite gifts, because I think she did it like 3 times. Just crazy. But the reality is that a puzzle is a 2-person game. The designer of the puzzle and the solver of the puzzle. Now, the solver of the puzzle can make it collaborative by bringing in more people over to work on the puzzle at the same time, right? So that, I think, is what I'm talking about when I talk about it's being okay to play, is that we need to be engaging. We need to be interacting in a different way than we ever have before. And we need to rediscover how to get back into that imaginative scale. And I'm going to now shamelessly shift gears. Now, I was going to tell you the definition of a game. My definition of a game, and this is going to be hotly contested. I'm sure I'll we'll have great conversations about it in future episodes. Definition of a game is any social interaction of 2 or more individuals face to face, utilizing a commonly accepted set of rulings for a specific period of time, and or with specific winning conditions by which the end or the termination of the event can occur. Now, having said that, it sounds pretty precise, but the reality is that I see life as the ultimate game. We are engaged in a process where we are socially interacting with other beings throughout our lifespan. We have basic rules. You're supposed to be kind, and you need to be legal, lawful. You need to generate revenue as a requirement for the culture so that you can provide for your own well-being and for that of your children. You need to pay your taxes. You need, all these things that are the set rules of life. And yet, when it comes down to the end, just like in any game, all of that isn't going to matter, because there's still going to be an end to the game, and then it's only after the game is over that there's any true resolution for what happened during that game. Wow, sometimes I go deeper than I expected, but again, empty chat room, I've got plenty of time here. There's nothing to prevent me from going there. So, the point I was trying to make in dealing with the imaginative aspect as compared to the imitative aspect is that as we get older, our understanding of the rules and bylaws and structure of social interaction and life in our communities becomes second nature. There are people that have problems learning the rules to any given game. There are people in this world that just haven't grasped what it is to be in this world. They haven't figured out how to operate within that parameter, and they have difficulties. And granted, there are also biological mechanics involved. The brain doesn't always function the same way. The tools are not usable by the same person in the same fashion. So, again, having known all of that, when I recommend or I advocate for taking on the attitude that it's okay to play, is to realize that we have the rule book. We have the mechanism for learning everything there is to know about each other, but that requires us to get to know one another. And play, perhaps more so than work, affords us that opportunity because there is not normally a bias, whether intentional or arbitrary, that's going to create a barrier for our communication. In a game, we know what the rules are. We know how long it's going to last. We know what the playing pieces are for and things like that. And one of them, for me, the visceral reasons to learn to play is that we recognize immediately that the person we're playing against has their own qualifications, limitations, and capacities that might actually be better than our own at that particular game. By knowing that, by just holding on to that, we have the ability to offer additional information to our opponent to let them know you're outstripping me here, or you seem to be having difficulty. Perhaps there's something I can do to help your play. Because here's the key: playfulness does not depend on the win-lose mechanic. Better look around. Probably somebody's not going to like that one. The reality is that we don't have to win to enjoy playing the game. I mentioned LTWW earlier, and yes, it's a Star Wars reference, and I won't actually have to say the words to have referenced that film. And you know what LTWW means if you've seen episode 4. Let the Wookiee win. Now I changed it to LTRW, because I believe in letting the rookie win. Now, that's another subject, and we will have to. Oh, I'm going to have time. Gosh, the advantage of not having a viewer on my channel, that really bites. Okay, guys, you got to come in, so therefore I don't have to wax poetic the entire episode. Come on, let's have a conversation instead of me just sitting here. Letting the Wookiee win, letting the rookie win, means teaching the person mechanistically how not only to play the game, but to play the game effectively. Sit with that for a second. Play the game effectively. Yes, everybody wants to win at every game they play. Matter of fact, I wrote a book on the subject. That's available from my website. I'll get to that in a minute. But I wrote a book called Top of Your Game, The Guide to Winning at Everything, because everybody thinks that's what they want, is to win every time they play. Now, I'm going to go ahead and flash to the end of that. Spoiler, we win when we win or when we learn. And we learn when we lose. There's a whole bunch of people out there who have Vince Lombardi on the brain who are going to disagree with me, because Vince Lombardi said, winning isn't everything. It's the only thing. And in a similar vein, Jim Rome, I believe it was, said that if a person is playing a game at a professional level and isn't trying to cheat, they aren't trying to win, and therefore not playing the game. That the only thing that matters is being at the top of the pile, the lead of the charts, top of the pennant race, whatever you want to call it. The mechanic that I'm talking about, the playfulness that I'm talking about, is I want people to play. And one of my favorite adages is that if you teach someone new to play, you'll always have, if you teach someone to play each day, you will always have someone to play. We want to engage. We want to love each other and appreciate each other and know how the other person thinks. And the way we do that is we pit ourselves, if you will, in the games environment, in a environment where we are playing against and with other people, so that we can learn how they operate. And more importantly, we can expand our own ability to communicate with them. I have to tell you, this has been an amazing episode. And it's going to be even better once I get it all sewn back together, since it's all in tiny pieces. But I believe that one of the things that we have to do going forward in life, and this is in particular to do with my new products that are coming out, is we have to find a way to reprime that pump and allow people to learn to imagine again. And the Passages RPG, which is impending, the first print run is done, and I've got it in the hands of some really good proofreaders, and I'm also going to be doing some playtesting in the near future before we actually try to launch. But the mechanism difference in it allows us to teach the very essence of what role play is, and have a person engaged in the game in a persona in less than half an hour. And that's with a full, persona, character sheet, whatever you want to call it, a fully developed identity in the specific realm of my world of Nikos. Utilizing the Passages system that allows for a level of individuality and creativity and imagination that doesn't exist. There isn't a product out there that does what Passages will do. And I have to say, one of my biggest advocacies is to get us to the point where the very concept of role play gets lost again. Because the reality is that we've all been role players. Every one of you that watches this video, at some point when you were a child, you played cops and robbers. You played World War II or whatever, name the new war here, because I know I'm talking to people way younger than myself. You have experienced role play throughout your life. You've been the banker in a game of Monopoly, or you've been, the very concept of a role played in a game can be extended to every game out there, even a simple 2-player game like checkers. You build a story around it, that the red team is, used to dominate, and now we're having to move on black squares. That's fine, but we're going to take all of your spaces, and pretty soon the only people left on the battlefield will be red. I mean, that's a mindset that brings you into the game at a level that hasn't been promoted. And again, I'm going to get conversation. I know I'm going to get flags and banners and people with pitchforks coming after me for that one. But we as individuals play all the time, and it's okay. And our culture has kind of squashed that and said, no. Let me go from a slightly different angle. There's a passage in the Bible where that, and I'm not a book, chapter, verse kind of a guy, but I can find it if you ask, where it says that Christ asked, suffer the children to come unto me. Let the little ones come to me. And yet later in passages we see where Paul says, I believe in one of the epistles, he says that when I was a child, I thought as a child, and I played and I acted as a child. But now that I'm a man, I put away the childish things in order to, move on in life. But my point with that is that we just put away the wrong ones. Yes, we are not to be childish. We are to be childlike. And I think we got that backwards. I think there are a lot of people in the world that came into their advancing years as they became an adult, where the childish things like selfishness and avarice and sloth and all those, great sinful things came popping into their life, and they grabbed a hold of those because those were adult things. You want to get ahead. You want to make more money than your opponent. You want to, I said opponent. You want to have a better house than the guy beside you. It's a little bit of vanity. The point being is that we surrendered the parts of us that are imaginative and remember how it felt to run into somebody who didn't agree with us, or somebody who was breaking the rules, or somebody who wanted to cause us harm. We put those people, we elevated those people, and we put down the people who interacted with us and socialized with us and interacted with us. And we need to reverse that trend. We need to look at a person's conversation and look for the benefit of the doubt. Look for where it is they might have a flaw in their ideology, their philosophy, not in their message. Because when we look at what persons say and not who said it and why, we are missing the real point and the real connectiveness that we can have in our adulthood. Now I'm going a little deep again here at the end, but when I say it's okay to play, it's perfectly fine to say, what was the strategy? What was the thought process you went through to come up with that position? No, we don't have to hear somebody say words and say, well, by those words you meant this. Because we can't know what's in their heart. We can't, in our culture today, sure, we can point fingers and say, well, you said this really thing and this really, and that offends me. But the offense, though, you realize, is internal. You brought the offense to the table. I may not have even known what the H you're talking about. I may have just simply made a faux pas, may have misspoke. But because we don't give people the benefit of the doubt, we don't engage people in the, like I said, the as if. My grandfather would say, you don't speak what you heard. No, let me rephrase that. You speak what you heard someone say so that they can clarify, rather than telling them how they thought when they said it. Wow, this has been deep. I went way further than I wanted to. So I'm going to take a few minutes here at the end. I'm going to remind you, you've been seeing it pass by down here at the bottom. For more information on the world of Nikos, the Passages game system, and what I'm trying to accomplish with my revolution in roleplay, check out www.patreon.com/Nikos. If you have any responses to this video, please post them below. Make sure you click the subscribe button so next time when you come to the chat, you can just hop right in and say hi. And I'm anticipating and embracing the possibility of there being some really challenging comments. And I'm, as a friend of mine used to say, he says, John, I don't know how you do it. He says, how do you get through life so smoothly? Because you've had dilemmas, and trust me, we could do an entire episode on the challenges I've had in my life, but you've had all these really rough things happen to you. How can you stay so calm? And I say, well, I'm not calm. I'm just a duck. By that I mean I'm sitting on the surface of the water, placid and serene on the top, but I'm paddling like mad below. So the idea that we have to express our anguish and express our rage and our frustration with other people in a way that isn't playful misses the very point of play, because play is the allegorical warfare. It is the method by which we can conflict with one another in a peaceful and pleasant way, and meanwhile still get a couple of minutes of ban banam in between. So this is Jonathan Albin. I am the Game Market Guru, GameMarketGuru.com. I'm sorry, it's not my website anymore. NikosRPG.com is my website. Why am I doing that? Getting to my email address is GameMarketGuru@gmail.com. GameMarketGuru@aim.com. Or NikosRPG@gmail.com. All three of those will work. Feel free to reach out, comment. I really recommend that you take a look at the Patreon. If you see any value in what I'm doing, if you see any message here that can be of help to me, and you want to learn more about the Passages RPG. You can actually get a preview of it and get to be one of my charter members on the site where that resides right now. If you subscribe to this channel and join the Patreon. Right now, at any level, at some point in the future, I'm going to have to lift that threshold off the ground. But for right now, join the Patreon at any of the levels, and you will earn the ability to get onto the Discord server and and also to our website account that has the Dark Shards system already there and available to be looked at and reviewed and even played. So, thank you again for your time. It's been a great afternoon. I look forward to seeing you next time. And not unlike as clever as I was last time, pushing It's Okay to Play in my last episode, last time as a teaser, I have to think for a second. Tomorrow is Matter Day, so and that whole weekly thing, go back and look at my previous episode on the Chores Day, and you'll get a better understanding of what I mean when I speak of different days of the week. Today is Why Day, so we talk about the things and the means by which I got to where I'm going and why we're going there. So Patreon, mentioned that. Email addresses, gave those. I think I covered everything. Thank you very much again, and I hope to see you next time. Tomorrow's episode, it's on the schedule already, so take a look at it, and I hope to see you then. I'm Jonathan Albin, the Game Market Guru. Have a great day.